Partaza, and for today I will disassemble the system unit as an exam for our CCE 101 Introduction to Computing. So before we start, we will remove unnecessary things in our work area and make sure that the system unit and the star screw will be remain in this table. And then before before you will perform this, you will power off the system unit and unplug, because if you unplug and power off the system unit, it is a crucial safety measure to protect ourselves and also the person who perform the disassembling or assembling the system unit, and also to protect our components or our computer components. Okay, before you start working, please stay in there the system unit, because there's a tendency that there will be remaining electrical charge, so that we need to discharge the system unit, and stay put in just 30 seconds. Okay, before we handling all the components inside this system unit, we make sure to wear a wristband to discharge. And for our situation, we have no anti-static wristband. We will do the alternative way, which is by putting our hand in the system unit case to ground ourselves and to remove the static charge from our body, and to prevent the electrostatic that leads to damage our sensitive components. Okay, and after that, we can proceed to remove this side panel of this case by unscrew. Okay, remove all the screws. And make sure to organize this so that it is simplified to assemble. And lock, and remove the case. And then let's proceed. The first thing we do, we disconnect all the cables in this system unit. So before you disconnect or unplug all the cables, you must remember where it be connected so that it is simplified to assemble it. And then let's remove first the front panel connector, which consists the USB, the audio, USB port, audio, the the power LED, the USB port, the power switch, and the HDD LED. And then we will remove the SATA cable. So this SATA cable is allowing the motherboard and the hard disk drive to transfer the data. So the function of this is to transfer data between the motherboard and the hard disk drive. So let's organize this. Let's put that. Okay, and then we will remove the 12-pin power connector from the motherboard, and this is the lock so that you can easily remove or unplug these cables. And this is to supply power, to supply electrical power to the motherboard to function its component. And then we remove the 4-pin power connector for a CPU that connected to the motherboard, and this will uh, CPU receive a additional power. CPU receive additional power to function the processor of our system unit. And then this is um, this is the power connector of SATA that connected to hard drive and to the motherboard. And the function of this is to provide electrical power to the hard disk drive so that they can transfer the data. And this is the CPU fan power connector to reduce the temperature or the high temperature of the CPU. And then this is the 24 pin that connected to the port. Okay, it's the 24 pin that connected to the port. And yeah, all is and this is for this and make sure to remove all the cables. So we are done to disconnect all the cables. So let's remove the power supply, the DVD ROM, and the hard disk drive. To remove it, let's unscrew. So make sure to hold the hard disk drive so that it should be in safety. Okay, let's set aside it and make sure do not put your hand or touch the printed circuit board so that we can avoid the damages of our components. After the hard disk drive, we'll remove the DVD ROM. Let's set aside. And then we remove the power supply by unscrewing this. Okay? And make sure to hold always the component so that you can avoid the damages. So this is the power supply of the system unit which compose the motherboard, CPU, SATA power connector, and that's all. Next is to remove the heatsink or the CPU fan by unscrewing this. Okay, and this is the CPU fan or the heatsink that prevent the overheating of our processor, and the function of this is to dissipate the heat operates of the processor. And then we will remove the random access memory in this memory slot. By removing it, we need to unlock, and then we need to hold it beside because it is very sensitive. Don't hold the printed circuit board just like the hard disk drive. Okay, let's remove the CMOS battery or the complementary metal oxide semiconductor. By removing it, we remove hold the lock of this. Then the function of this is to provide continuous power to the CMOS chip, and so that the essential information will be stored, including the time and date, the BIOS settings, and the hardware configuration, while the even the computer is powered off or it is unplugged. Okay, after that we will remove the processor. To remove it, let's and hold it inside. So don't avoid to touch this, and this is the brain of the computer, and this will be perform calculation and execute instruction of the various for the various tasks. So this is the brain of the computer. So this is the motherboard, and this is the nervous system of the computer, and this is the function of this is to transfer data and distribute power and connectivity to its various components so that they function all of their components. And then this is the memory slot. Then you can expand your RAM for the expansion of the capacity. And then this is the connector for the pin of motherboard. And it's the 4-pin connector of the CPU. And this is the CPU socket, which is the slot of the CPU. Yeah. And then this is the south port, and this is the PCI slot and the AGP slot. AGP slot is to connect the video card or the graphic card, and this the function of this PCI, the peripheral component interconnects, is to connect the other peripherals or cards, and then this is the connector of other cable, and this is the slot of the CMOS, and that's all. The function of its components, power supply, provide electrical power to all the other components within the computer, ensuring that they operate properly. Hard disk drive, store and retrieve digital data serving as a long-term storage medium. The motherboard, the central nervous system of a computer, providing connectivity, data transfer, and power distribution among its various components. The CMOS battery, or complementary metal oxide semiconductor, provide continuous power to the CMOS chip, which stores essential system information, including the date and time, BIOS settings, and hardware configuration, even when the computer is powered off or unplugged. CPU, or Central Processing Unit, is the brain of a computer. Its primary function is to execute instructions and perform calculations for various tasks. Processor socket provides both the mechanical and electrical connection necessary for the CPU operation, facilitates cooling, and allow for CPU upgrades and replacements while ensuring compatibility with the motherboard and CPU model. heatsink fan to prevent the CPU from overheating by dissipating the heat generated during its operation. RAM, or Random Access Memory, provide temporary storage for data and instruction that the CPU needs to access quickly while the computer is running. DRAM slot, or the Dynamic Random Access Memory slot, adding and expanding the computer's RAM capacity. The PCI, the Peripheral Component Interconnect slots, used to connecting various types of expansion cards and peripherals. The AGP, or the Accelerated Graphic Port slots, older computer motherboards primarily designed for connecting graphic cards. The South Bridge, it managed various input and output or function and connecting peripheral devices to the CPU and memory. The North Bridge, providing the high-speed pathways for data transfer between the CPU, memory, and certain high-bandwidth peripherals. Different parts of cable and its function. Let's start in the cables of power supply. SATA power connector that is also connected to the hard drive. The SATA power connector provides the necessary electrical power to the connected storage device. It supplies the voltage required for the drive to operate. The next is the 4-pin power connector that connects to the motherboard for the central processing unit. It ensures that CPU receives the additional power it needs for stable and reliable operation. The next is the power connector for the motherboard, responsible for supplying the primary voltage needed to operate the motherboard and its components. Sometimes it is a 24-pin power connector. The next is the front panel connector. Front panel connector is a cable of a system unit case that connects to the motherboard. So the first is the power button connector. This connector allows you to connect the power button on your computer case to the motherboard, so you can turn the computer on and off. The reset button. Similar to the power button, this connector links the reset button on the case to the motherboard, enabling to you to reset the computer. The power LED. This connector connects the power indicator or power indicator LED on the case to the motherboard, indicating whether the computer is powered on. Hard drive LED or HDD LED. This connector links the hard drive activity LED on the case to the motherboard, and it blinks or lights up to show hard drive activity. USB port or USB port cable. Front, front panel USB connector allows you to connect USB ports on the case to the motherboard, providing access to additional USB connections on the front of the computer. Audio connector. These connectors are for the front panel audio jacks on the case, providing audio input and output connection to the motherboard. HD audio is more modern standard compared to AC97. Other, other cables that connects to CPU. SATA cables is connected to the hard drive. This SATA responsible for data transfer between the storage device and the motherboard or controller. The IDE cable services serves the IDE cable serves as a data conduit, allowing data to be transferred between the motherboard, IDE controller, and the connected storage devices. So lastly, the CPU fan power connector to supply the power of the fan and to reduce the heat of the central processing unit. And that's all. That's disassemble of system unit.